I got to think about this issue when I'm a philosophy student. I'm sitting in. Thanks for Sonia for letting me sit in this class. And I think about human rights, but the universality of human rights. But then there's the gender issue, and even for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, they talk about gender equality, but they usually talk about women and girls. But they talk about equality, but there are differences among the different sexes, at least biologically. And I want to explore the difference in gender, and especially what masculinity is. And I think about that in terms of politics, and even like in the military. It's typically men who are soldiers, right? And the women are nurses. That's the image that we got. And even back to the up to World War II, when the last war, the World War that happened. But then now there are more women soldiers. And if I were someone in the military, I would really ask them. So we got our hands dirty, and we have to fight. Do you really want to be one of us? That's something that came to mind. But there's also some sexist presupposition when I ask that question. And I want to explore how that interact with us being Chinese and the West, Europeans and Americans, how we interact with all that in terms of gender studies. So here we are. I will first talk about Orientalism very briefly. I won't get too scholarly. It's more comments, as we mostly know about Orientalism, like the East, the exoticism. It's an exotic place. It's the others, and I will highlight something about the Asian culture and how individuality plays a role from the Western culture. And it comes to domination, because that's something that's there seems to be something a kind of male Western masculinity. There's something that strikes our mind when we think about all these things. And then I'll talk about honor, because there are some people who say that the Western tradition, especially in the East, there's no such thing as a culture of honor. And I want to explore that and how it relates to a kind of masculinity that seems to be more pertinent to the Asian culture. So Orientalism, communal identity. So how we get our identity in a community. So I'll start with something that's, by the way, I will exaggerate gender differences in my presentation to try to see whether there is such a thing as something particular to Asia and Chinese, the East. So Eurocentrism, I think most people would know about that. That's to take the East as the others. It's so there's the West, typically Europe, and they go to other places and find out what they are, and they study them as something that's different from them. So the East as the others. And this is a photo from a very old movie called Susie Wong, and it's a Western male, and she I think she's mixed, but she's supposed to be the Asian that's being courted by a Western man, and the Susie Wong narrative. So there seems to be a racial asymmetry between a Caucasian man with Asian women. That's like there was a TV series from TVB, I think, about marrying to other people, marrying other races, and there seems to be an asymmetry. The West, it's typically a man, and the Asian, it's a woman. It's just less popular that we saw an Asian man with Caucasian woman, right? And that's an asymmetry that's drawn by race. And what underlies that's a complicated issue, but that's an observation. And of course, the the gender asymmetry that goes on. I'll talk a little bit about that afterwards. And colonialism, I want to contrast that with imperialism, because both use the strength, the military strength, to conquer a land, and they govern certain places by the geography. And I want to draw a metaphor to something like the difference between men and women, the gender asymmetry, because when you the colonizing, it's like that photo. You don't really coerce someone with complete force. I think imperialism would be more like that. But to colonize a place, you do need the consent or the people that want your help, something like that. It's like a man who asks for a woman's hand, and still you need the woman's consent. You don't get to impose everything on the colonized. But still, there's a power relation, that imbalance, and that's just history that happened. The West colonization, they're militarily more powerful, and I want to draw this asymmetry, because that's been at play when we talk about the relationship between even men and women. It's something like something that we don't talk about that much, I think. So okay. And to contrast how the West see the East and how the West interact with the East, and we look at the East, we go back to maybe a century ago, that we still, a Chinese is more a communitarian society. Our identity is constituted by our belonging to a village. We belong to a village. Of course, we're not the only people who think about the surname, the family name, but still, who you are is roughly defined by where you're from, your places in the village, and how you relate with one another socially and with other family. And I think this is something that's maybe more Chinese. It's like when a Chinese man or boy, when they suffer, or when they hurt themselves, because like in Chinese, there's a phrase called 身體髮膚受之父母. And sometimes when someone got hurt themselves, maybe they would think about how their parent would think, their mother would think. It's like they're suffering. They don't want their parents to suffer with them. They think that they wrong their parent by doing something bad to them. I guess that's what lies behind that phrase. 身體髮膚受之父母. So you shouldn't treat your body badly. And that's one thing. And another thing about the communitarianism is that the West, they expand the territory, they go to other places. But when Chinese people migrate, because there's the greater 大中華, I mean, there are a lot of people who are abroad for various reasons, but they think about China, or well, the Chinese people, maybe Hong Kong. There's some, unlikely, like America and Australia, they're not the indigenous people, right? The West, they go to other places, they take their places, then they live there. But it seems that Chinese or Asian people, they think about eventually they will go back home. There's some sort of slight differences that I think underlies us and them. So the communitarianism is contrasted with an individuality that I think seems to be more from the West. So there's a kind of independence that's like us in Hong Kong. We go to university in Hong Kong. Maybe the most we do is go live in a dormitory. But in maybe even in China, mainland China, or especially in Europe and America, they go to other universities and they have to take care of themselves. I mean, if you live with a family, you don't need to know how to cook. You don't, that kind of independence and even maturity seems to be something that's more West-like. That's something that they do. And I think, like, as an example, as a very concrete example, I think people say that there's a woman friend who said, well, the Hong Kong boys, they don't even know how to change a tire. I think that kind of epitomizes what underlies all that, right? But typically when you live in the East, you have to know how to drive, you even have to know how to take care of your car, you have to know the mechanics. So the unity is the person, the individual, instead of you relying on your family, your parents, other people. So an agent individually, autonomy is something that's important. However, even the West, they also think about relation, right? I mean, this is Princess Diana and the two, Harry and William. They even if they have the unity in the collective of a family, they themselves constitute a unity, but there's also a unity of the collective. They together constitute a family in virtue of the social role, so they don't ignore their social relation. In a way that what differs, it seems in China, in the Confucian way, we seems to be to talk about, to impose on us about something like the rituals and the propriety. We should listen to the elder and succumb to the social peer pressure. I think that this is something that's, again, more a contrast between East and West, the so-called individuality that the West, the European have, and us, that's more familial and even need to belong to a certain social group. There's a little difference between the East and the West, and also a kind of self-sufficiencies, because we usually in the Chinese context, we talk about how we have to pay our parents after they're old. But in Europe, in America, in the West, they usually the elderly, they can take care of themselves. So they are, it's a tradition that they are self-sufficient. We can go and, well, I study philosophy and maybe gender studies. It's typically not the kind of degrees that get you guarantee you a job, right? And but when you think of going to university, your parents will think, oh, if you do that, then you don't get a job. But what's unsaid is that, well, if you don't get a job, then how are we going to live, right? So again, the typical Europeans, they can pursue their dreams, or the life goes easier without parents' reliance on children. And even if the children would provide for the family, their children will grow to be self-sufficient. And again, in the Chinese context, maybe family business, it's, well, your father has a business, and they expect the son to go on with the business instead of doing something else. And again, that's usually maybe in the West, they have a choice. They can choose whether to inherit the family business. So across generation, there's some difference between the East and the West. And then because I'm talking about self-sufficiency, being one's own person or being one's own man, this is a traveling salesman, the American vision of being earning your money for the family. So I want to talk about that, the West way of thinking about masculinity to highlight something about domination. So I don't know who that is, but that's an athlete, a Black athlete, and typically he's athletically very well endowed. He can run very fast, but I think that there's something called a double consciousness in the Black community way back when. They have the slavery past. But now they live in a world that's even right now is white dominated. And how are they to struggle with this contrast? So of course now they after the civil rights movement, they can vote. There's no segregation. They can sit where they want on the bus, but still it's been a long way that they are conferred the power legally And even though the power is substantiated by the moral right, because they do have that right, the ownership about themselves, being their own person, the kind of, I talk about manhood in this way because sometimes when you grow up, and there are things that makes you the way you are because of something that's beyond your control. You're born to have a certain parent. Maybe some people, the typical way is someone was born to a divorced parents, so they have some mental issue, something like that. And if there's a causation, then that mental issue is something that's not their fault, right? But then I think one thing about being one's own person is that however you are, you not only would you have the power over yourself when you do what you want to do, you also own up to how you are, and that's being responsible for what you are, and also to have the power over yourself. And if I think about manhood this way, to do what you want, to have the power over yourself, that's not to have power over others, but then in the capitalistic society, we have competition. Well, we supposedly to be a fair competition, and of course there will be inequality. Some people make more money, some make less, and with that inequality, we might be envious of someone else. And the problem is that usually when we think about what's good or bad, we think about how good we do, how much we improved ourselves, our competence, how we perform better. That's something we think about among ourselves. But then in a free competition, there are other people who earn more. Maybe the betterness is not a real betterness that you can evaluate on your own, but you compare yourself with others. Some other people make more money. You can think, well, like Donald Trump, his father is quite rich, I think, and however much he earned his money, he started easier than most people, even in America. So he talked about he had a loan from his father when he started his business. And so the way I want to think about manhood is really to be liable, to be accountable for yourself and to improve yourself, instead of so that's the real betterness. It's like a competition with yourself. You want to do better and do better instead of comparing with others. And instead of, so there are people who who are not as good as others, the kind of incompetence. But there's a kind of incompetence that are just socially disadvantaged, and there's a kind of incompetence that's they don't have power over themselves. This is very complicated. It's like you want to do that thing, but you can't because in Isaiah Berlin, he talks about positive liberties. It's like if you've learned to paint, then you've acquired, you have the kind of liberty that you have, but someone else don't. So when you, there's a kind of a comparison that's in terms of that kind of incompetence. That's a kind of incompetence that's not about not having the social status, not having the money, not in comparison to others, but it's really you with yourself. You don't have the power over yourself. And that's one way I understand how it is not to feel like a man, because there are things you want to do, but you can't. It's not like you're being oppressed, but it's just that you yourself, even if without oppression, there's something you can't do. And that kind of incompetence, that kind of feeling of incompetence, and Eric Fromm talks about compensatory violence, because there are people who he used the word impotence, but I don't think he meant that the sexual way, impotence, and they have to commit compensatory violence. The violence makes them feel to compensate for their incompetence. So in order to feel oneself as a man, they exert the immoral power over others through violence. And that I want to understand, like there are people who will start a fight in bar fights. It's very typical in Ireland, I think, in Irish pubs. They of course I don't know how. One typical way is that there's some quarrel and they want to settle that. And even if you know that you won't win, but for face, to save face, they want to fight someone, even if they're going to lose. So that's how I would understand that's how I would understand this way of masculinity, and to understand what's toxic about toxic masculinity. Of course, there are many other manifestations, and that's one thing I want to talk about. So honor, because in a bar, maybe there quarrel about whether you should talk to that girl. I've been talking to her now they got into a fight, and I want to shift that to the polarity bias that I want to go into, because in courtship, again, I'm trying to exaggerate the gender differences. When men, well, again, I'm exaggerating gender differences, and I'm focusing only on the heteronormative, because that's, at least that's something I know more about. Other things I will have to listen and read and learn from others sharing. So usually the conquest of heart, it's a man trying to win a woman's heart, so she would accept it. And however much a woman is interested, she would be actively passive. She would, I don't know, like when a man flex a muscle, a woman flip her hair, something like that, to get attention of the man, so he would make a move, so to initiate. So if there is that asymmetry, then the bar fight would, the good case of a bar fight is when two persons want to settle an issue with violence. So dueling, the cowboy style. So two persons want to settle something and they can't, so they decided to have a duel. It's a free choice, enter into a lottery of strength. That lottery is that, so you know how a duel is, right? They walk, they face back to back, and they walk a certain distance, and they turn and shoot one another. So they freely choose to commit to the lottery, and the one that wins, and the one that lost. And both, they maybe they would both lose, but they will commit to the actual outcome. So that's how they actually want to settle something with violence, but there's some sort of honor behind this sort of activity. That's some anthropologists, I think, that's not observed in the East. And but I because I want to talk about a kind of masculinity that's not typical. And of course, some would think that the polarity is the power relation, but and typically masculinity is dominating and femininity is the submissive. But I want to say that there's something masculine about being submissive, like in a military. Because so suppose, well, let's say you enter into the military freely. Some people are drafted into it, but let's say you go into the military freely, you don't get to choose all your superiors. Some are in a higher rank simply because he advanced. And I think there's some manliness in following order. When someone orders you to do a certain thing, you just follow it and you do it. And that kind of submissiveness doesn't make you a sissy, doesn't make you feminine, doesn't make, I don't know. It's what a man do. I think what a man does, right? When you to follow order and to submit to the hierarchy. And so on the other hand, if a military and even war and even the competition in a military rank, that's real politics. It's just what it is. And if you lost, and if you commit to the actual outcome, to know that, yeah, you lost in a fair fight, that's actually what a man looks like, I think, instead of trying to hold on to something that's not really of value. And lastly, that's Bruce Lee. So if the Western style of masculinity, if I were to epitomize, if I think the bar fights epitomizes that, then I want to point out that there's some sort of hypocrisy that's like you posture because you don't have the real power. You compensate for your incompetence because you're incompetent. And if you are competent, you just do what you want to do instead of posturing and pretending that you have power. And that kind of going for something fictitious in comparison and even there's some honor that's real, but there's some kind of honor that's just each trying to feel themselves a man to in comparison. So that there are this kind of difference. So and I think that of course I'm playing along with the narrative that the East and the feminine are something, there's something underlying them, and I think the Western style of masculinity, there's something to learn from the woman, because well, like we biologically because of a pregnancy, there's something that's well, they have to be more careful when they have sexual activity, and on the other hand, they will produce something that's they have to care for the child for 8 months. They have more investment into the future of generations and even in humanity. And menstruation is something that the biological male wouldn't have to go through. And that these are actual limitations. I think that keeps, from a cis man perspective, the other sex grounded. That's how women are more not going for the kind of posturing that men would go for. That's one explanation. And to nail the point home, this is Chicago, and people talk about Chirac because Chicago is like Iraq. It's very dangerous. There are a lot of violence, a lot of shooting. Sorry? Yeah. They have the highest homicide rate. And there's a movie that talks about how the women they can't tie the men up, and if they were to go out to fight, they can't stop that. But they have started a movement to ask the men to not to fight, otherwise they won't have sex with them. Yeah, so that's no peace, no pussy. I think that's a slogan. So that's the men want to fight, the women don't. And there's something real about not wanting to fight for whatever the men want to fight for. And the women are trying to ground the men with whatever bargaining power they have. So I think that's, yeah, okay. So that's a summary. I go from the Western, the actual history of the West being the power that invade others and go about, and to look at what's special about the Western tradition in terms of individuality, but a bad case of that individuality in terms of having power, domination, and how it manifests itself in a bad way. Yeah, there's something about honor, and honor is something that's intangible, that seems to be not about only having a child or having a good family, but you defend your honor. Not well, like even in Japan, there are, I think, the samurai, after if they lost in a battle, they would kill themselves. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, well, even if they died, I don't know whether they think they dishonor their. Yes, yeah, seppuku. Yeah. So that's evolutionarily, biologically unfit, because you die, and you didn't die because you were eaten by a tiger. You didn't die because you were trying to hunt for food and you lost. No, you kill yourself because of honor, and that's something that seems to be not valuable. But I think that maybe there's some value in that, but still, I want to clarify there are something good and there's something bad in these things. So yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that there's some slight difference between the bar fights and the military, because a bar fight initiates out of some quarrel, or even honestly just to to show who's the boss, something like that. But, okay, yeah. But if I don't think those who engage in bar fight are necessarily patriots in a way that if they lost, they yeah, I think it's complicated. But if you lost in a bar fight, do you think that it's worth it? I mean, if you die for a country, I think some people would think it's worth it. Yeah, but if you got killed in a bar fight, or even you got injured in a bar fight, I don't know whether they would think it's worth it, or it's just, oh, I shouldn't do that, I was drunk. So yeah. Mm. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you.